Everyone, welcome to our public hearing regarding case number MSP 18-0002, Lake Club Estates. We are going to treat this obviously as a formal public hearing. The time is now 6:02 p.m. I am calling this meeting to order. Attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. And I would ask Vlad, our planner, to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay then, so we'll go over some rules of play here. I'll just make a couple of opening remarks. We're actually meeting, this is a very unusual situation because it's what we consider a remand in the sense that it has come back to us to consider the results of a traffic study that we requested at the earlier hearing, and that's what we're going to be taking up tonight. What I'm going to do is allocate 30 minutes between the consultant, Rand Wichman, and the folks at Whittle that did, is it Whipple? Whipple, excuse me, that did perform the traffic study. And then we'll proceed with comments from you, the public. You'll be limited. We used to go 3 minutes. We're going 5 minutes now. And then at the end, we'll have a rebuttal, if you will, by Rand Wichman and or the engineer. And so without any public ado or delay, whatever, I'm going to ask Rand if he would like to come forward. Did I forget anything?
Staff.
Staff, did you? Oh, that's right, staff.
Oh, yeah.
Mary Shaw. Mary Shaw is our acting director. Mary is filling in for David Callahan. He is on vacation. Sorry, Mary.
We prefer staff to do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's true.
Is this on? It is.
Yes, it is.
Good evening and thank you for your time. I have a couple of public comments that were received today that I'd
Okay.
like to enter in for exhibit.
It'll be B2000.
Okay.
For your consideration this evening, Commissioners, case MSP 18-0002, reconsideration of Lake Club Estates, major subdivision preliminary approval proposing 25 single-family residential lots and 7 open space tracts. The history of this project began in January of 2019. The hearing examiner heard the application and recommended approval to the board. The board held a public hearing and voted to deny the application in April. In June, Community Development, received a request for reconsideration. The board held a public hearing in August and eventually remanded the application back to Community Development to work with the applicant to provide a traffic impact study. We received the traffic impact study from the applicant's engineer in December of 2019. This is a general location of the subject property east of Coeur d'Alene Lake, adjacent to Highway 97, just off of Echo Bay. This is a closer view of the proposed project area and an overlay of the actual proposed plat. You can see that the property lies both north and south of Highway 97. I have also starred the general location of the existing access of panorama view intersecting with Highway 97 and the new proposed general location of the proposed access road in relation to panorama view. The highway capacity manual standards are classified from A to F for levels of service. A being the best road conditions, F being the worst. And just a bit of information that you may or may not know, ITD has adopted level of service D as the minimum acceptable for two-lane highways, Class 3, which is what Highway 97 is, and also for signalized and unsignalized intersections, level of service D. The traffic impact study submitted by Whipple collected traffic data volumes in both August and October of 2019 for peak and off-peak, off-season times. The performance analysis included Highway 97 facility, existing facility report, and the intersection of Highway 97 and Panorama View Drive. There were also levels of service scoped at various mileposts within the area, and that scenario, those scenarios included existing 2019 existing data as well as projected future for 2024 with and without the project on and off season. The engineering also included a study of proposed traffic, future traffic for the new proposed access road if the development were to come to fruition. The results of the highway capacity analysis, according to the report, show that all segments of Highway 97 are expected to have capacity and continue to operate at an acceptable level of service, even with the new added trips. And the site distance analysis for the intersection of Highway 97 and the new project access will have adequate site distance, and there were no additional turn lanes or traffic control devices recommended to be installed if the project is approved. The conclusion of the report was no level of service deficiencies identified if the project development moves forward, and the project is recommended to move forward without further analysis. We received 25 public comments on this reconsideration application, all in opposition, and the concerns were additional traffic, road condition of Highway 97, increased density, and possible environmental impacts. And there is the plat. And I would stand for any questions.
Leslie, Bill?
I don't have any.
Period of time for the study? I looked at it, what was it, August through October, I believe?
No, August and October.
Oh, August and October,
And
okay.
the reason for that, and I'm sure that Whipple engineering representatives can be more specific about the intention behind that, but was because the counts, the study was intended to cover both a peak and off-peak
And an
season
off-peak.
for traffic.
Makes
Yes,
sense.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Rand, floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rand Wichman, 2992 East Gotham Bay Road, Harrison, Idaho. I'm here representing Dan Baker and the property owners here on this Lake Club Estates. I live just, for what it's worth, I live just a little bit south of this project. Our presentation tonight will be brief. The record already contains information that demonstrates this project's compliance with the requirements for the requirements for approval. The board, as Mary indicated, has requested a traffic study to better understand the extent of the impacts of this proposal would have on Highway 97, also to address the existing conditions of Highway 97. We believe this hearing is appropriately limited to testimony on that issue, and so we have limited our presentation accordingly. Whipple Consulting Engineers was hired to complete the traffic study. My client did not have any relationship with this firm prior to engaging them for this study. County staff was consulted and approved of this firm for the study, and county staff also approved the scope of work for the study. Representatives from Whipple are here tonight to present the results of their study and address any questions the board may have related to it. Mary has kind of already spoiled the ending here in that the study affirmed our prior statements that the highway has the capacity to accommodate the subdivision and that our new approach meets the standard for this type of access. But beyond that, you should really hear it from the experts. That's why they are here tonight. We'll yield the balance of our presentation time to let the folks from Whipple further explain their study and answer any questions you may have. And unless you have additional questions of me at this time, I'll look forward to addressing you again in rebuttal.
None? Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome, Whipple Engineering. Thank you, Rand.
Commissioners, my name is Todd Whipple, and I have a copy of the PowerPoint that we're going to put up, and then a copy of a letter that I think came in late for your packet. So I have a copy of each one of these, and these are just basically summaries of the study for discussion tonight.
Okay.
B 2002.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Todd Whipple. My address, we have to give addresses? 21
Yes,
South
please.
Pines Road, Spokane Valley, Washington. We were contacted in late August to help out on a traffic study, and when we got the call, we immediately went out and did a traffic count at the access where the future roadway would be. The traffic study hadn't really been scoped yet, and so So we went out in August right away while we were still in season and took a traffic count. How we count, it doesn't mean anybody didn't see a car out there. There's a traffic count system that we use, which is a system called MyoVision. And what MyoVision is it's actually a camera.
Could I ask you to speak up a little? Yeah, because
It's actually a camera. And
Thank you.
It looks like a big game camera. It's about, I don't know, 1 foot square by 1 foot square. It's in a big black box. We just put it on a telephone pole or a light pole or a tree sometimes, wherever we can get. So we went out and did that. And then as the study got scoped, we went back out and did supplemental counts in October. And so it's not unusual on recreational routes that you do counts when you can get counts done. But then you look at historical counts, because ITD has counters, and then you use those historical counts to modify the counts that you did in October, even though we're out of season. We had 1 count in season, 3 counts out of season, but then we modified all those to be in-season counts or likewise counts. A little bit, I don't think I've been in front of you guys. If I had, it's been a really, really long time. We're a full-service consulting firm. My specialty is traffic and storm, so if you have any storm questions, I'm good. But I've done over 2,500 traffic studies, so we've worked in almost all the western states. I'm licensed in all the western states. We've done traffic studies of all different sizes. In this area, the one you'd probably be the most familiar with is we did all the traffic for Coeur d'Alene Place, which is just up the road. Designed all the signals, all the widening on Ramsey. So we've been in this area. We just don't do a lot of work in the county. So this is the letter. And the letter essentially is just we received all the comments that had been turned in, 2 days ago, and we wrote this letter to discuss those comments. And those comments, I think, as staff has pointed out, there were 3 or 4 main main topics. And those main topics revolve around really, I think, things that we hear all the time. We need a traffic study. We did that. The traffic counts, how do we know what's going on out there? We think there's too many cars on the road, bad level of service, safety issues, pedestrians, all the basic stuff that we always hear. And so this first table is really just kind of a highlight. I think staff has already covered most of this. ITD and the county have minimum levels of service requirements. The minimum level is D. All the area locations where we did traffic study counts and then levels of service analyses turned out to be level of service A. Within the area of the accident, in the area of the proposed approach, there really aren't any accidents there that have been recorded, which is what we do. We get our accident data from the State Patrol, and then we take a look at a segment, and then we apply that. At this point, what we got, there weren't any. I'm not going to say that you're not going to hear anecdotal studies of, I saw a guy drive over a road, or I saw a guy hit a guardrail. It's just that there weren't any accidents recorded to the State Patrol that showed up on the list. And then the last thing we did, because it was it came up during the scoping, and there's a lot of comments about it, which is sight distance. So all this first slide really does, which is the first paragraph, I said traffic counts for the study should have been compiled during the summer. There were a couple people made that comment. We did count the intersection, the proposed intersection on August 29th, and then we went back in October, and then we seasonally adjusted those based on the automatic traffic recorder that ITD has on Highway 97. And these are the places where we actually did the counts. These were MyoVision counts. The nice thing about MyoVision is it's a video recording, and so we do is take a video of the road, we send that off. The company has an algorithm that then counts it, but then we get the traffic count back, and then we have the video so we can manually check it. So we don't put a guy in a car out there anymore like we all used to do with little tick marks. Now it's all done electronically. So these are the 3 locations that we did the traffic counts in October. And then we took the automatic traffic recorder counts for all from 14 through 18. We looked at them monthly and then annualized them. And then we used a growth rate as it related to a seasonal factor of 25% increase based over the counts that we got. And this is all the data from the automatic traffic recorder down in St. Mary's. What we did is we did our basic level of service analysis. In the file is, I don't know if you guys got it in your packet, but there's a regular traffic study. It's got all the different stuff that
We have the full study.
Okay. We use Synchro. We check it with the Highway Capacity Manual software, and Synchro is actually a program that is easier to use, but it uses all the algorithms from the Highway Capacity Manual. This basically shows you what the intersection level of service is, and so I don't know how many conversations you have on level of service. You know, there's intersection. Really, that's kind of all there is. There's lane segment level of service, which is based on speed. We didn't have that here mostly because we don't really have an intersection level of service by segment speed issue, because when we get to the volumes and the capacity, you'll see that speeds go down as capacities increase, and right now there's not enough capacity, not enough volume on the roads to detrimentally reduce level of service on the through segments. And then this is the same thing that staff had up, what the definition of delay is. It's in your packet. If you can just go through it. It's people are time-based units when we drive. We all have a way that we go. That's the quickest way we go wherever we go. And so it's all empirical. Traffic study started in the late 60s with a document called Circular 212, and then it turned into the Highway Capacity Manual now. And so over time, it used to be we had unsignalized level of service, which was passenger cars per hour. How many cars is reasonable to pass through an intersection in an hour? Signalized intersections are always delayed based on time. But over in like the 2000 update, they went from passenger cars per hour to time. And so unsignalized intersections and signalized intersections are all now time-based levels of service. So with level of service at A, you're going to say that there's little to no delay, and the delay range is 10 seconds. Now, that is average delay. So if 10 cars go through it, if one car waits a minute, one car waits a second, there's 10 seconds of average delay. And so it's not that everybody experiences 10 seconds of delay. It's just that there's an average delay, and that's how that works. It's just an average delay. The next question was traffic safety. We reviewed all the traffic safety accidents that we could get for the segments that we were looking at. And we came up with, we didn't have any that we could find that came from the State Patrol. I mean, we can only request and only get. We don't have anecdotal records. We don't have somebody had gotten a wreck, called their insurance agent, didn't call the State Patrol, didn't file an accident record. So, and this was the data that was available for the intersections within the study area. One of the other questions had to do with the current traffic is too high on Highway 97, and traffic being high on a highway it's kind of twofold. A, there's a perception, and B, then there's a reality, and then there's decision criteria associated with what I consider the reality, and that's really based on the traffic study element. So roads are intended to be used, and roads are intended to be either developed on or not developed on, and then they're either roads that provide access to the land, or they just provide a road between point A and point B. And a really good example is the interstate system. The interstate system doesn't really provide land access. Sometimes in bigger cities, it's an intra travel thing. You just go from, state line to downtown Spokane, or downtown Spokane to Post Falls, but you just can't get off at Dave's house because you can't visit him. Highways, rural highways are intended to be land activity highways. They have their limitations as it relates to intersection spacing, so many intersections, so many driveways per mile, or so many driveways per segment. But the intent is that they're intended to allow for access to it from the adjacent properties, and then that access then provides a linear opportunity to go north or south or east or west, whichever way. And so the only way that we can tell if a 2-lane rural highway or 3-lane rural highway or 4-lane rural highway has capacity is based on volume. And so in this instance, this facility has a capacity for a 2-lane highway of 3,200 passenger cars. I'm going to say it's per day. It says passenger cars per hour, but that'd be awesome if it was. But it's probably passenger cars per day. I'm assuming it's passenger cars per day. In this instance, Highway 97 at the approach, where the future approach is going to be, only has 670 ADT, and that's total trips in both directions. That's what was counted, that's what was measured, and that's consistent with the other counts that we got. Did I time out? So, well, I have.
While we're waiting on this, I have a question.
Sure.
When you talk about the counts per hour, is that based on an average of August and October?
The counts per hour, the ADT that we got was the counts in October multiplied by 1.25 to bring them up to the in-season volumes, because recreational roads or roads that provide access to recreational areas really between middle of May and the middle of September obviously experience much higher volumes than they do in November. And so the reason that we look at that stuff, can you get that back up for me? The reason that we look at that, the reason that there is these opportunities to modify is because it's not always appropriate to, or practical to be able to do a traffic count in season. A really good example is this. The timeline that staff had up was that, was decided to have a traffic study. The applicant was got notice in August 9th. We got called in like the 20th or the 27th or something. We went out literally the next day trying to be cognizant of the fact that we hadn't hit Labor Day, we were still in season, and we needed to go do some count in season so that we had a reference point. We hadn't scoped the study yet. We could have put up, we have 6 cameras, we could have put up 6, we just put 1 at the approach. And the reason we put 1 up at the approach was after having done 2,500 traffic studies over the years, we assumed that the biggest question would be what was the access going to be at the future driveway for these 25 residences. So we wanted accurate data for that level of service calculation. As it relates to just average daily trips on the road, we made the assumption that we're not so sure what they're going to want us to do. Let's not just go put the cameras up just for the heck of it because we don't know. We'll wait to find out because we can always seasonally adjust. There's the Traffic Engineering Handbook allows that. The Highway Capacity Manual allows that. There's lots of documents that tell you how to seasonally adjust. So we knew that we would be fine, that we could seasonally adjust. And the numbers, when the screen comes back up, that we're showing you, those are in-season numbers. Those are not the off-season numbers. Those are kind of the peak numbers.
Okay.
So that we're evaluating the highest travel time of the season on that highway. So I think the thing that kind of surprised me, I've driven up and down Harrison, 25, 30 times. I never put two and two together that the highest ADT on Highway 97 is actually between Gozer and Arrowhead and not Gozer and I-90, which I thought was interesting. And I was told it's probably because of the store. So I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. So there's a lot of cross-traffic back and forth in that area, but then obviously south of Arrowhead, right in front of this facility, we only have 670 ADT, and that is seasonally adjusted. And then on the other side of the other approach, we lose 300 cars a day as we go back towards I-90. So we're just making the assumption that for whatever reason in season, people are going back and forth to either a boat launch, the store, the bar, whatever it happens to be. And that's a predominant trip that was kind of surprising. Once you get around the corner, it just drops off to what we have in front of the site. So then there was a question about the road is deteriorating and that they're not to the public's expectations. This is probably the most difficult one to deal with. And I say that because there's no decision criteria. So everything that we do as engineers, whether it's for traffic or for storm, water, and sewer, there's a standard. Your water has to be this clean, you have to treat your effluent this much, your stormwater has to be treated this way. Roads are established based on ADT, level of service, accident rates. There's these standards that we can go to the standard book, the rules that are available, and say, oh, it meets the standard or it doesn't meet the standard. If it's deficient, can we bring it back from deficiency to an acceptable level, or come back in 10 years? So as it relates to road maze segment analysis, that's really a function of ITD. They're the arbiter for their facility. They're the ones that have to put it in their budget to figure out if they're going to do a BST overlay, or if they're going to rebuild a section of the road, or if they're going to do this, or if they need guardrails, or if the 2-foot shoulder, paved shoulder that they have on the outside of the fog line is starting to ravel in a certain section. Should they come try to do it? Should they fix the ditches? So there are maintenance elements that, while are visible to the public, are a function that's beyond the developer. It's a function beyond the county. You have to rely on ITD to go fix their road. All you do is get calls saying, hey, the road's, what's going on with the road? When are they going to fix it? You call your contact at the ITD and find out it's 2 years. So we wanted to talk about it because it's a concern. We got some of the most comments about the quality of Highway 97. And we're not saying that it's not the best road. It's not that it's the best road on the planet. We're just saying that it hasn't got to a level that ITD has decided that they need to do some kind of maintenance activities to it. We sent our traffic study to ITD. They reviewed it. It's 25 additional lots, which is 25 more PM peak hour trips, which is 250 more ADT, and we didn't get a comment back. And whether they're aware of the comments that came in from the public or not, the conditional relationship of the roadway to the traveling public is just that. It's kind of a personal thing. Motorcycle guy is going to have a different idea of a road than a guy driving a pickup truck who's like, wow, I wish they'd fix this because, man, my 3/4-ton pickup is just jarring my kidneys every time I drive up and down the road. And so that's a public perception that's beyond.
Mr. Whipple, can you speak up, please, again? I hate to do this to you.
Okay, sorry. Wish I was shorter. And so So the quality and the ability of the road to provide traffic is really a function of maintenance and once the road's built. And there's really no decision criteria for it. So it's almost impossible for a traffic engineer, unless I work for the DOT and my responsibility is roadway maintenance, to really do anything about it other than just to say, yeah, we drove the road and there's some crack sealing that needs to be done, and there's some patches, but it's beyond the decision criteria available for a traffic study to make a recommendation one way or another. And so we just will leave it at that we kind of think it's an IDT issue. This is just a Google Street Earth picture. It wasn't anything that we just picked one. I think this is pretty representative of what goes on out there. You can see there's a Jersey-type barrier on the lakeside. There's some pavement that's probably had some alligator cracking. It's had some patching. It's got a two double yellow stripe, which means no passing, and then it's got fog lines. It's got 1 foot to no foot shoulders, and then ditches and side slopes. So we just put this in here because this is the road that everybody drives. And while we can look at this, I have no decision criteria to evaluate it. And without decision criteria to evaluate it, there's no decision criteria to require mitigation. Therefore, if there's no mitigation, there's no impact. So we talked a little bit about, there was a comment about construction. The only construction we have is actually at the entrance to the property when we tie into the state highway. We weren't too concerned about it. It's going to there's going to be an approach built. There'll be some work in the road. I'm sure there'll be striping, and there'll be a little bit of paving at the entrance, and yeah, there'll be construction traffic, and I think that's just kind of a given. There was a comment about pedestrian safety, and this may be related to the trail down to the space that's available at the lake. And so once again, pedestrian safety, there's not very many standards associated with it. What we normally recommend is that if you're going to have a specific crossing that the developer put in advanced warning signs, probably for the first year or two, even stripe, some continental striping, which is the striping that goes with traffic so it doesn't wear out so fast. I'm sure that ITD won't come back and maintain that, but the signing will let people know, advanced notification per the MUTCD that says, here's a pedestrian crossing, 35 mile an hour recommended speed. And so this is what's out there now. Wherever there's pedestrian crossings, all there really is advance warning. Pedestrian crossing, there's no striping. It's pretty standard along this highway. And so we would assume that where our crossing is proposed, we would do something like this. I would recommend some interim striping. Striping has never stopped a car, but what striping does is once you kind of train somebody where to cross and how to cross, even though the stripes might go away, as this project develops, we'll be able to keep them in that location. They won't be wandering up and down the highway. Lastly, there was a comment about the entry road off Highway 97 for Lake Club Estates will make internects any more harrowing with the high speeds of vehicle. We took this to mean that we needed to do a site distance analysis, and so if you go to the AASHTO Green Book, it tells you what the distances are for the speeds. So there's right turning and left turning. They're from a stop, they're not rolling, so the car isn't moving. It tells you how many design feet you need, which is sight distance from the stopped vehicle to the earliest point that they can see an oncoming vehicle from either direction. This is basically how it works. When you're on the approach from Lake Club Estates, you're going to look to your left, and when you're trying to turn left, you're looking straight ahead. So, so what we do is we found over time that it's really hard to see in these photos, but these little reflectors actually show up on the photos. So we put these on the approach, and then we go we put a cone at 480 feet to say, okay, could I see a car at 480 feet? I can see that car at 480 feet. And then I say, okay, well, this is where a parked car would sit. Does that parked car at the 10-foot decision point? So sight distance is 14 feet from back of traveled way, and then 10 foot is the decision point. So if you think of the front of your car, as it approaches the fog line, the driver sits at 14 feet, But ASH2 allows you to go to 10 feet for the decision point for something like this. Somebody's, excuse me, parked their car to get mail. And so you can still see the cone at 480 feet. And then conversely, the other way, this is actually probably the best sight distance on the whole project is that's, you can go 600 or 700 feet that direction, so there's adequate sight distance. So as it relates to a car entering or exiting from this approach, you know, we think that it meets the criteria that's established in ASH2 for the speed of the facility. Other than that, we think we tried to cover all the bases that were requested of us. We started early, had a scoping meeting, went back and did the counts that we did, tried to answer as many of the public comments as we could. You know, one of the things that we always like to close and to remind the commissioners is that we're not saying that the project doesn't have any impact. Obviously, we're asking to build 25 lots on Highway 97 and build a brand new approach. What we're saying is that we believe that this project meets all the decision criteria for approval as it relates to traffic. We've gone out, we've done all the studies, we've looked at sight distance. And from our perspective, we can't find any deficiency that would require either remediation or keep the project from being approved from a traffic perception. So, questions?
Questions for Mr. Whipple?
Okay.
You're
Reserve
good.
Time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move on to public comment. You'll be given 5 minutes, absolutely strictly enforced. And I'll start, okay, Rand's already spoken. Let's see, do we have any others that are in favor? Mr. Whipple has already spoken. Okay. Okay, so let me take this one. So Ben Goodmanson, you're the applicant? You're okay? Okay. All right then. Okay. Why don't we go through those who do wish to speak? How's that? Can we do that? Okay. We'll take the folks who wish to speak first. How's that? Okay. Now let's start with this one. Josh Sewer, is Josh here? Neutral wishes to speak. How are you? Good. Name and address, please.
Josh Sir, 11168 North Bartlett Street, Hayden, Idaho. And I'm the 2020 president of the Association of Realtors. I'm also involved with the state board of directors at Idaho Realtors, so I try to kind of stay in the loop on the legislative and the political side. That's why we're going neutral, because we can't weigh in on specific projects. What I'm here to address is kind of a macro trend that we're seeing and how it affects the housing stock, and that's the anti-growth that I think is pretty prevalent in the area. There's always been the two sides of anything like this. You have the folks that are developing property and the folks that are affected by the development, and they're typically at odds. We're seeing it a lot more, I guess, polarized than we have in the past, and how it's manifesting itself in a lot of cases is roadblocks to development, whether they're increased lot density, increased frontage requirements that make infill lots non-buildable. There's a lot of those kind of things that affect the affordability and just the regular inflow of housing stock of what we call inventory. So then that's where the three of you are very important to kind of filtering through the forest, to see the forest through the trees on what's best for the whole process. But at a time when we have high demand and the lowest inventory we've ever had, impediments to development, I think there's a misconception that it will keep the $1 million homes from taking over, and it actually has the practical application of hurting the lower price, more affordability based product, because all of these costs are pass-throughs. So that's my 2 cents. I just feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't address that, and I appreciate everything you're doing. We trust you to make the right decision here.
Questions for Josh Sewer? None, thank you. Yeah, okay. Boy Scouts of America, Camp Easton, neutral, may wish to speak. Name and address, please.
Andrew Bell, 23516 South Highway 97, Harrison, Idaho. This is the Camp Easton property. I'm the properties administrator for the Inland Northwest Council of the Boy Scouts of America. So in 2019, the Inland Northwest Council, in cooperation with ITD and Eastside Highway District, installed a pedestrian underpass under Highway 97 at our highway. This eliminated any safety concerns that we had due to traffic increases because of this development. Because of that, the only remaining concern that for the BSA at this point with this development is whether future residents in the development will have any concerns or complaints about noise or activity levels on the property during both seasonal and year-round operations and the proximity of those activities to their properties. The concern is that such complaints could potentially escalate to the point of hampering or damaging future operations of our facility and the scouting program. For this reason, we would reaffirm our request from previous hearing that there be some form of required disclosure of the proximity to and nature of camp operations given to any future residents prior to their occupancy in order to prevent those kind of problems happening with our operations in the future. As long as that is met, we remain neutral on whether the development goes forward.
Appreciate it. Any questions? Thank you. Okay. In opposition, Jerry Lynn wishes to speak. Name and address, sir.
Jerry Lynn, 5969 Panorama View Drive. All right, I think last time I was here, we talked a little bit about that fire suppression stuff, requirements out there, and I know they had mentioned, I believe, 4 accesses to water resources. It's still a major concern about how that's going to happen. I think it's more significant than they probably really understand, so that's one. 2 is the access. I think what we're going to find is serious concern about one point of ingress and egress out there for this major subdivision, both for safety of people that live there and first responders as well. And given Highway 97 and access requirements that they have as far as distance and such, it's gonna, their little piece of area is gonna get a little bit smaller that they gotta deal with. They've got on the east side of that property, northeast side, a Class 1 stream, have to be about 75 feet away from that for any type of activity. So it gets a little tight where they have to operate in there. So I'm just saying that'll be a serious concern coming up. Third thing is, and no disrespect to the traffic study folks, I mean, the great numbers and all that, but if you live out there, you live here, you know the time is not August, late August, that's not the season. It's July, it's June, that's when the most people are out there. It's camp traffic, it's the people that come here to visit traffic, it's the locals traffic, it's the seasonal traffic, it's the motorcycle traffic, and I know we can put a number against October, try to make it work, but in the reality is, you're gonna have daily 50, 60 cars in and out of that subdivision right there, and you're gonna have more traffic coming at it. You're gonna have pedestrian traffic, I know you put a crosswalk, but you're gonna have 75 people potentially trying to get across the street, walking on the shoulder, or doing what the Gaza folks do, is getting there side by side, right down there, which is illegal. So it's creating really an environment of potential disaster, right? It's not if, it's when. And so there's just a lot of issues with that. You know, you guys voted it down the first time, and nothing's really changed, I don't think. I think maybe the square peg is further in the round hole, so to speak, but it's still all the same. It's just a bad idea for many reasons.
Yeah, I do have, any questions? I do have one. Your particular background was in firefighting, as I recall?
Correct.
State?
Yeah, state fire inspector.
Okay. Appreciate it, thank you. Okay, moving on. Okay, also opposed, wishing to speak, Lori Lamont?
Lori Lamont, 1725 East Updell Court, Harrison, Idaho. Can I approach and give you guys a copy of
You need to get closer to the mic, please. Thank you.
This will be B 2004.
speaking points? In case I forget something. So, we do not support the applicant's proposal based on, the traffic study and whatnot. Nothing has changed. The traffic has increased. The roads and highways are still getting worse. The conceptual driveway is directly across from Panorama Drive, which is, again, less than 500 feet from a school bus pickup and drop-off point, and a turnaround point for the bus. I don't think I saw anything regarding that. Additionally, it does not provide adequate fire or water services in that area. The volunteer fire department, it will add to the Coeur d'Alene EMS coverage with a 25 family influx to and from in and out of that proposed subdivision. I know previously they talked about wooden walking paths on the lake side. Again, that's going to increase the pedestrians going back and forth and going across the street there. And I think that, what else? Something else that, really hasn't been completely eliminated. When you look at their drawing, conceptual drawing, or what proposed drawing, they have phase one. They own a considerable amount of additional land. So if it is a phased division, why aren't we seeing the rest of the phases being articulated in their plans and addressed? And that access would come directly off of Panorama View Drive there. And it just seems like, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on here. Couple questions on the traffic. I live probably like less than 1,000 feet from where they would be coming in and out. And it appeared that the cameras were only up one day, and I just have a question on the days of the week that they happened to pick, and they were down in less than 24 hours. So if you guys could take a look at that more closely, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Lamont? None. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so moving on, Craig Waters, opposed, wishes to speak.
There might be some unnecessary preamble here, but I'll include it with my whole statement. The Board of Commissioners remanded the application requesting a permit to develop Lake Club Estates by Echo Bay Holding LLC back to the Community Development Department in order to work with the applicant to conduct an independent study. In its traffic impact analysis, Whipple Consulting Engineers reached conclusions regarding the additional traffic generated in connection with the development of Lake Club Estates will primarily affect the level of service provided by the two-lane scenic byway known as State Highway 97. In the traffic impact analysis, Whipple Consulting Engineers went beyond providing conclusions regarding the level of service and recommended that the development should be allowed to move forward without further traffic study. I posed the question to the Community Development Department. Was a recommendation by Whipple Consulting Engineers called for when the Community Development Department defined the scope of the independent traffic study? If a recommendation from the consultant wasn't within the scope of the contracted for analysis, than the field observations, assumptions, methodologies, and results contained in the report used to arrive at a recommendation favorable to the applicant are questionable. I have two additional questions for the Community Development Department. Those are, to what extent did the Community Development Department work with the applicant to conduct this study? From Whipple Engineering's presentation, doesn't seem like there was much interaction with the applicant. But why wasn't this, but if there was, why wasn't this independent study conducted independently of the applicant? So when the Board of Commissioners requested this study, it was to work with the applicant. I don't think the applicant should have been worked with. I think that there should be an independent study, present their conclusions, and I don't think a recommendation was called for unless it was within the scope defined by the Community Development Department. And lastly, anecdotally, this project cannot be sold without a marina. Let's not kid one another. And when the marina goes in, there's going to be a hell of a lot of foot traffic across State Highway 97 in season, and that's going to present a problem as far as traffic. All those people trooping back and forth to their marina, it's going to be horrible. And I know this hearing is centered on the traffic study and the resulting analysis, but the back of that darn bay is going to go to hell, and it's going to affect how I enjoy my property and how these people here on this side enjoy their property. And like I said in a previous hearing, this lake starts going downhill. Coeur d'Alene is going to be negatively affected, and the tribe has withdrawn from the lake management plan, and that says a hell of a lot. If the state can't protect, local community's not interested in protecting the lake, regardless of what this traffic study says. And I'm not a traffic engineer, and it seems like a very well thought out study, but I've been driving that road for 20 years, and it just keeps getting worse, and ITD doesn't want to put any more money in from Echo Bay to I-90. They pay from Carlin all the way to Harrison. That's not a well-trafficked part of Highway 97, and now it looks first rate. So those are just some things to consider. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Mr. Waters? Sorry.
I'm sorry, but my 5 minutes up. I got right into my spiel here. Craig Waters. My address is 5970 South Panorama View Drive, Harrison, Idaho.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Carleen Cada, opposed, may wish to speak?
My name is Carleen Cada. My address is 20621 South Highway 97, Harrison, Idaho. Once again, the community is before the Board of County Commissioners trying to stop a high-density development in a much-loved rural setting. The majority of the local residents oppose this development. Our rural Kootenai County is quickly being eliminated. Over the several hearings on Lake Club Estates, we have heard multiple reasons for this project to be denied again. We are all aware of the deteriorating highway, especially Beauty Bay Hill, and the dangerous conditions that can occur because of the large construction trucks on the road, increased seasonal traffic, and it is the only road in or out of East Side if an emergency should occur. My dear friend Nancy Curry was driving north, going down Beauty Bay Hill, and was almost hit head-on by a construction truck. She reported it to ISP and contacted the truck company owner. And the driver of the truck said that he had to cross over the line because the road is failing, the shoulder of the road is failing, and it would be dangerous to drive his construction truck over that part of the highway. The highway is not going to be repaired per ITD because it is not a commercial highway. But there is something that can be improved, and that is the condition of Lake Coeur d'Alene. The Coeur d'Alene tribe removed itself from the lake management study due to inaction by the state to initiate change that would result in a cleaner lake. May Widmeyer remarked that the lake's health and vitality needs work after receiving a C- grade from the EPA. Pollution in part due to leaking septic systems, adding phosphorus and other fertilizers to the water, along with heavy metals from mining that settled on the lake's bottom, per Tribal Chairman Ernie Stenger. Lake Club Estates may add to this pollution problem with multiple septic systems and landscapes close to the shoreline, which will eventually drain to the lake as there is a seasonal creek in close proximity to the development. The Echo Bay wetlands, which help to clean and filter the water, may be affected as well, especially with walking areas going over that wetland. The Board of County Commissioners need to become stewards of Lake Coeur d'Alene by stopping subdivisions along Highway 97 corridor. Our precious gem needs to be protected, as well as the vanishing rural landscape that has made Idaho so special. Hopefully, the board will act in the best interest of the entirety of Kootenai County and not that of one special interest group. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Cada? None. Moving on, I think we'll switch gears now to some of the folks who might be in favor. Susan Crenshaw, in favor, does not wish to speak. Bill Crenshaw, in favor, does not wish to speak. Dan Baker, in favor, does not wish to speak. Kyle Eaton, is it? In favor, does not wish to speak. And Chad Baker, in favor, does not wish to speak. Is it Calissa? 8069 North Stottsford? Kasha, sorry about that. Your last name? Living Wallet. Okay. And you are in favor but do not wish to speak? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Deborah Stone, opposed, may wish to speak.
Deborah Stone, 5321 South Freedom Lane, Harrison, Idaho. In response to the traffic study, first of all, August 29th may have been close to Labor Day weekend, but it was a Thursday. October 15th was a Tuesday. October 24th was another Thursday. To say that traffic study maintenance is beyond the control of the developer and county is ridiculous. They did a study at milepost 94.6, which is right coming shortly after you get off of Interstate 90. They didn't put down what the rating was for that. It's a C rating. If it's a C rating now, how soon before it becomes a D rating? That's where the majority of the traffic is. The majority of the traffic is not in front of or at the intersection of Panorama and Road A and 97. I saw attachments for traffic count, reduction worksheets, and 24-hour count summaries. They were done for 97 in Echo Bay, milepost 85.6, and milepost 94.6. They talked in their presentation about milepost 91.75. I didn't see any attachments. I may have missed them in the traffic study for that milepost. They also included a traffic reduction worksheet and 24-hour count summary for Lochner Four Lakes, dated 10/15/19, which is the location is State Route 904 north of First Avenue. I have no idea where that is. Sounds like it's in Washington. It's clearly not on Highway 97. You can't pass the buck to ITD. It has to be taken into consideration for the safety and the welfare of the citizens of Kootenai County. We have to travel on 97. There is so much traffic going from 90 up 97 to the top of Beauty Bay Hill. There are no shoulders there. If you're coming up from 90, you're going to fall into the lake. If you're coming down to 90, you're going to fall in a gully. There's no road repair work. It continues to deteriorate on a daily basis. I grew up spending my summers on a lake in Wisconsin. What's happened to it is just, it makes me cry. I don't want to see that to happen to Lake Coeur d'Alene. The first time I came to Lake Coeur d'Alene was back in the early 90s, and I said, oh my God, what a beautiful place. I'm sure it will maintain its beauty. That's not going to happen if these high-density developments continue to pop up along the 97 corridor. The good news is, I just turned 68. I don't have children. I don't have grandchildren. When I die, I got nobody to leave anything to, but the way it's going on Lake Coeur d'Alene, I wouldn't have anything to leave to them anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Stone? None. Okay, thank you. Christy Lynn, opposed, does not wish to speak. Marilyn Sullivan, opposed, does not wish to speak. Fred Fricke, opposed, does not wish to speak. Eileen Little, opposed, does not wish to speak. Tom Little, opposed, does not wish to speak. Shannon O'Brien, opposed, does not wish to speak. Vancil Lamont, opposed, does not wish to speak. Donald Hubbard, opposed, does not wish to speak. Rayanne Macias, is it, or Messias? Opposed, does not wish to speak. And Alan Lamont, opposed, does not wish to speak, and that concludes the comments. Oh, sorry, we got a couple more here. This is from W.J. Lampard, I believe it's William Lampard, and he just does not support the request, but I don't see the specific comments. And also from Sylvia Lampard, does not support or is opposed, and again, not present to speak. Okay. All right then. So now we've basically concluded the public comments. Rand, Mr. Whipple, between you, 15 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Commissioners. Rand Wichman again for the record. Just a couple of things, and then we'll ask Mr. Whipple to finish it out with comments on the traffic study. You know, as developers, what we do is we strive to meet the requirements that the agencies and the county put forth in front of us. And once we have met those requirements, we move on to the next. We check the box, we move on. Now, whether that is for the density issue, you know, we're far lower density than what your zoning allows. Whether it's stormwater runoff, we comply with your site disturbance requirements, and that's your standard. We move on. We comply with the health district's requirements for septic systems. Check that box. They approve it. We meet their criteria. You move on. We don't keep studying alternative systems for septics, for example. The health district says, yes, you can do septics because that's acceptable and it meets the standards. Then we say, okay, then we're going to do septic systems. And it's the same thing with traffic. You know, we go through this exercise. We demonstrate that we have no discernible impact on the facility, that the facility can accommodate the proposed additional traffic. And we say, okay, that matter is solved. We don't keep exploring it after we have met the various agencies' requirements. And to ask us to do anything beyond that sets up an impossible standard that we can't hardly, there's no way for us to know when is enough enough. You meet the standard, we should move on. And that's what we're asking here, is just to an acknowledgement from the county in that we have met these standards. We have done, whether that's fire flow or anything else, we demonstrate we meet the standard and we move on. Now, some of these things, fire flow is a good example, that we can't demonstrate at this stage of the game, nor is it appropriate for us to do so. But we don't get to go past final plat. We don't get final plat approval unless we've demonstrated that we've got that water, we've got sufficient storage, we meet the requirement for fire flow, and we don't pass go, which is final plat approval. But, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to spend a couple $100,000 in drilling wells and creating that system unless we know that we've got preliminary plat approval. But we don't get final plat approval, we still got nothing if we don't get final plat approval. And if we can't prove up that, that fire flow, for example, between now and final plat approval, then we don't. But we shouldn't have to spend $500,000 on this preliminary plat approval. The system is set up to have us go through certain steps, meet your standards, meet the other agency standards, and demonstrate that. And we have complied with that. For preliminary plat approval, we have met those criteria. There's concern for the marina or a marina on the other side of the lake. As we've said before, we are not proposing one with this project. We may, at some future point in time, do that. That would be a separate application from this proceeding, and you will get your opportunity to evaluate that if and when that ever occurs. Similarly, with regard to someone referred to phases, we've never referred to this as a phase or phase one or anything like that. Yes, my client owns some property on the west side of Echo Bay, and if he chooses to develop that at some point in time in the future, then you'll get your opportunity to review that as well. And we'll be back here and we'll be having the same conversation with a different set of facts. But that's not what's before you today. And you know, we are, at this point, we are looking for approval of these 25 lots. Camp Easton, we have no heartburn whatsoever. We indicated before, we think we're a good neighbor to Camp Easton. We think they're going to be a good neighbor to us. We're all in favor of appropriate disclosure in our CC&Rs. And I believe there was even a condition of approval at one point in the staff recommendation that addressed that. We think that's an appropriate condition. We're going to have it regardless of whether you impose it as a condition. You know, beyond that, I would just say, you know, one thing, question about the interaction between the engineer and the applicant and us. You know, our exposure to the engineer going through this traffic study was only to provide information about the project. We also provided, I provided additional information about other projects in the area because they were aware that I had worked on other projects in the area. And so we provided information to them. We did not have much coordination or discussion beyond that, beyond the original scope and the passing along of information to them. The conclusions that they came to are not in any way influenced by the applicant. We pay the bill for it because it's not appropriate for the county to pay for such things. But I have no doubt that whatsoever that if the opposition had paid for the traffic study, that the traffic study would be the same regardless. And so I have a lot of respect for Whipple Engineering, and I believe their integrity is impeccable, and the study is what the study is, and that's just the condition of the road there. So other than that, if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, Mr. Whipple can get up here and discuss if there are any points on that traffic study that he feels need further clarification.
Thank you. Any questions for Rand Wichman?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whipple?
Commissioners, I don't really have that much. I don't really have that much, just a couple of points of clarification. Traffic studies are done on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. They're not done on Fridays or Saturdays. Not saying those aren't maybe the highest travel days. It's just that the standard of practice and care for the analysis is always Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So Ms. Stone picked out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday perfect. She looked at them out on the calendar. The one count was mislabeled. It was done in the same date. It was just mislabeled. And I think a couple people asked about the dates that we did them, which is Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Every traffic study we've ever done has been done on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The only time we have ever deviated from that was we did a 1 million square foot shopping center, and we did Saturday. I think that's it, unless you have questions. I think those were things I just wanted to cover. Oh, and I did want to say that 94.6 milepost, that was my request of my team to do because I wanted to know what was happening at I-90. It wasn't scoped by the agency. In other words, staff didn't ask for it. I just had my guys do it because I wanted to know at I-90 what the level of service was, and she used to correct us in the report. We reported it as a C. With the project, it was level service C.
All right, thank you. Questions for Mr. Whipple? None, okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, so that totally concludes public testimony and applicant's consultant rebuttal. I think there's a fair amount of information to digest. I'm of the opinion that we can conclude, but I think we ought to delay deliberations. Any thoughts? Leslie, Bill?
I'm fine either way.
I don't see any reason to delay a deliberation and a decision. People have waited too long, and
So you're ready to deliberate tonight?
I am.
Yes.
You're ready to deliberate as well? Okay, then, so do we have a motion?
I move that we end public testimony and enter into deliberations.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios,
Nay, but I'm outvoted, so off we go. Well, who gets to go first? Go right ahead, Leslie.
Oh, I was
Oh,
pointing
Bill.
to Bill.
Well, I think that at any project like this, it's a matter of the totality of the project. And my big problem with this project is the condition of 97, and I know that's out of the scope of the control of the builder, the developer. I understand that, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't negatively impact all citizens down that road. That's a horrible road, and it's the unwanted child of IDT. They won't do anything about it, and it's a dangerous road. It is today a dangerous road without any increase in traffic.
Keep going.
I don't need to. That's all I've got.
Okay. Leslie?
Well, jumping through the hoops, crossing all the Ts, dotting all the Is, I think that's been done in this case. Growth is painful, and I get it, but if all the agencies are of the opinion with conditions that this is a project that suits the area, and especially with the additional traffic study, then I don't find any basis to deny the project. I would approve with conditions, and the other thing is the infrastructure, which this is kind of a new development to us, but the infrastructure would have to be completed before any building permits were issued.
Yeah, this is where we find ourselves lately. Anything else?
Just the fact that, he's complied with everything in the law, everything that we've asked, and, the traffic study is what it is. I'm sorry about the condition of the road, but that's not something that, if we did that, I wouldn't be able to go back and forth to my house, every day. So it's, I think this is a suitable, and it's lower density than what it would be if they followed the zoning laws.
Okay. Okay. What are the conditions you're thinking about?
The ones instituted by the hearing examiner, and there may be additional staff conditions. I don't actually have that packet with me. And I would add the additional that the CCNRs disclose the activity at Camp Easton, which may already be in the hearing examiner conditions.
Mary, go ahead.
I don't recall if it was, but I do recall from the last hearing that the applicants said they would be okay with that. And I see Mr. Wichman nodding his head again.
So I have some questions. Yeah, go ahead, Mary, please.
Chairman, Commissioners, I have included a copy of the hearing examiner recommendation in this report. I don't know if you can read
Yeah, it'd be
it.
hard to read.
Yeah, it might be.
Do you want to summarize it?
Good evening. For the record, Vlad Finkel with Kootenai County Community Development. The conditions of approval in this case are similar to every project that we review and provide a staff report for the hearing examiner and to the board to subsequently make a decision on. Each and every condition is stemming from the comments that are provided by the agencies and based on the code requirements that we process as we go through the review of the application. So it addresses all sanitary requirements, road access requirements, fire suppression requirements, Panhandle Health District requirements, and there are instances where we do create these more project-specific conditions that address impacts that are associated specifically with that request, but may not be relevant to a similar major subdivision. Like in this case, Camp Easton, because it's the request next door to this one, rather than any other major subdivision in Kootenai County.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of questions of staff. Every condition has to be met for final plat? Have we ever had a situation that you can recall where we had to terminate a project because of the failure to meet conditions?
Would it be easier if I came up to the podium?
Please.
Your time's up, Vlad.
I'm sorry, I have bad eyesight, so it's hard for me to see you guys. But when we process a final subdivision application upon approval of a preliminary decision, our obligation is to review each and every condition of approval that was imposed by the board and show how it's been complied with. Now, there are instances where the applicant does not have to build infrastructure improvements, but has the option to provide a completion bond with either the county if it's for private improvements, or with the appropriate public agency if it is to be dedicated to a public agency. There are instances where the applicant may not have provided full evidence of compliance and we request clarification, but I can't think of any final plat application where we either ignored a condition or there was lack of evidence in the record to show how they have complied. So we try to dot all the i's and cross all the t's, but like I said, improvements, physical improvements, can be bonded for and can be completed after the plat is recorded.
Okay.
Right, but they would have to, infrastructure has to be completed before the issuance of building permits.
Permits.
Commissioner Duncan, that has always been the case. I think one of the reasons why this is brought up today is because of another matter that was brought to light where the code states that you can have or you should have a restriction on the face of plat stating that no building permits will be issued until all the infrastructure improvements are in place. We have, in my tenure with the county, have always implemented that. There are maybe some very few nuances where road was almost completed or was about to be completed, and we issued the building permit, but the certificate of occupancy was never issued because you can't occupy the residence without adequate access. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on, Vlad. Do you have any questions of Vlad?
No, I have a comment, whether this...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's important that this to me looks like a nice project in the wrong place, and 97 makes it the wrong place. And I think commissioners, at least this commissioner, feels it's very important that you do the best you can to protect the welfare and safety of the people of the county. And I think to approve this project would put some people in jeopardy. That's all.
Okay, I have a couple questions for staff. Fire suppression, we heard from a former state fire inspector, and I'll just quickly recap some of his concerns. Single point of ingress and egress, pedestrian crossing, possibly, and I'm going to rephrase it or summarize it, inadequate water supply. So I guess my question more specifically, I guess would have to apply to the East Side Fire District. Care to comment? Have they commented? I don't have it in front of me. Vlad, do you want to?
Commissioner Felios.
7.06 is there, but Vlad probably has it written.
Just to clarify, there is a section in our code that states that any subdivision that has subdivisions or has more than 25 lots has to have a second point of egress and ingress. So being that this is a 25 lot subdivision and doesn't exceed that threshold for requiring a second access, while it makes sense that you should have second access, it's not required pursuant to our code. And therefore, as staff, we cannot force somebody to provide more stringent or more rigorous improvements to a proposed plat than what the code minimally requires. And access is typically something, not typically, always reviewed by the appropriate highway district. If it gains access off of a public road, if it gains access off of state highway, then we defer to ITD. But I don't think we have the authority to require a second
So
access.
essentially, East Side Fire doesn't have objections.
I don't have their original comment.
Leslie, you're closer. Can you read it?
Fire district requirements for residential development regarding roads, gates, driveways, turnarounds, international fire code, fire hydrant locations and distribution, and hydrant and sprinkler requirements for hydrant requirements, other fire code items to consider that may be applicable to your project. So it's pretty...
Sounds like they're just reading the regulations. Okay, thank you. But I don't recall that they objected.
No. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. What makes this difficult, and I think both Commissioners Duncan and Brooks have made very salient points here. If we're going to deny this on the basis of Route 97, then we ought to stop entertaining any request for subdivision on that route. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It perhaps should happen, but I don't think that would ever withstand a lawsuit. And I think I'm probably safe in saying that. Watch.
Well, I think outside the ability to impose a moratorium under Idaho law, I think that would be correct.
And the moratorium would limit us to 6 months.
Correct.
And so, you know, we have a number of items to continue to consider here. I think we've covered them all. I have traveled Route 97 for many years, for about 15 years or so. We did own land on Arrow Point. We continue to press on ITD or cite ITD for failing to do this or that, and I don't expect that there's going to be any change in that regard. And so I think it's going to continue to be a problem. But on the other hand, if that's the case, then we would have to start declaring a moratorium, hope that we can renew it after 6 months, go another 6 months, and then find ourselves entangled with lawsuits of various types. And so, despite the fact that I initially took a position to oppose this, and we've asked the applicant to jump through the hoops, to undertake a traffic study, which I think he's done, and whether or not we think the study is entirely sufficient, I'm certainly not qualified to make that determination, and I think most of us in this room are not. I do hold quite a bit of stake, or assign quite a bit of stake, to Mr. Lynn, who is a former state fire inspector. Oh, forgive me, current. But then again, I also have to hearken back to the East Side Fire District. My frustration is it's rare that I find a district that just says no. And if these districts will not say no, how do we say no? And so reluctantly, and very reluctantly, I have to side with Commissioner Duncan and approve this project.
I move that we approve case number MSP 18-0002 Lake Club Estates with conditions set forth by the hearing examiner and an additional condition that the CCNRs have full disclosure on the Camp Easton activities.
I will second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
No.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios.
Aye. Motion is carried. With regard to case number MSP 18-0002, time is now 7:30. Meeting adjourned. Thanks.